The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.
Mike, we're back. It's another special edition on location of the Unlikely Innovators. Of course, that's not where we are now. We're on Zoom.
Yes, that's true.
Now, I want to just say at the outset, I'm finally wearing the shirt you wanted me to wear for this live event, because I think you're quite right in that we should be wearing branded apparel for each of these live events. And I have done that in the past, but I ended up not doing that this time. But for the intro, I am wearing the Cambrian College branded long sleeve shirt.
And we didn't even coordinate this. We knew that we had to film an intro to provide some context for the episode you're about to either watch or listen to. And so we recorded this episode that you're about to hear live with Ken Doyle, Executive Director of Tech Access Canada, in Montreal a couple of weeks ago as part of the TAC Innovate Forum 2024. And Steve and I have coordinated our Cambrian gear before. And, when we were in Montreal, he said, I didn't bring any Cambrian stuff. And I thought it was a joke. And I was expecting him to stroll in on, Wednesday morning wearing his Cambrian gear like I did. And no, he was serious. He forgot to pack all sorts of things. What did you said you forgot to pack? Your toothpaste, toothbrush.
Well, I never
you had
bring
no underwear.
Yeah, I don't know about that. So, but
at least one pair.
Yeah, you know me well. It was not enough socks.
Oh, that's what it was.
I had to go buy some socks.
Oh, and gym
shorts. Just a mess.
Just a mess.
All to get it in a smaller bag, and I just didn't bring anything as a result.
Yeah, but what wasn't a mess was our chat with Ken Doyle.
Wow.
This is why I'm here.
Exactly.
Why they haven't fired me from the podcast yet that we created. But no, I think I'll let you kind of chime in as well. But I think one thing that we should note as well is that the audio is going to be crisp for you listeners. The video, the AV company that was utilized in Montreal, let's just say we're not going to even mention their name, but I don't think they'll be used again by Tech Access. But they forgot the cameras the day that we did the podcast with Ken, which actually kickstarted the conference more or less. So we had some innovative folks in the audience. Shout out to Laura for donating her phone for a good 55 minutes to record the video. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see the video. The audio is going to be overlaid. But I think it was such a great conversation. Ken's obviously such a great guy to talk to. He's very candid. He's obviously been around the network since the beginning, so he's seen the evolution of Tech Access. He's seen the evolution of the TAC program, which we get into with him as well. But I think for us, doing them in front of people is always fun. And I would say, honestly, that was probably our biggest, studio audience that we've ever had. I'm using studio in quotation marks. And I'm also using audience in quotation marks because they were there because we were inserted as part of the program. But I think they had a good time.
I think they were there for us, to be honest. I talked to a few people afterwards, and they said they wouldn't have gone if it wasn't for the live podcast episode. I didn't talk to anyone who said that.
No, but no, I think it was well received. What was your takeaway now that we've had maybe a couple of weeks to reflect on chatting with Ken?
Yeah, I think the one thing is that there's Kenisms that I think need to be part of either some kind of blog post or a book at some point. We won't get into them now, but I just like the streets is talking to me.
Yeah.
And that's a favorite one of mine. But no, Ken was a great sport, perfect guy to have for that topic, obviously. And I think, in judging by the folks who came up to us afterwards, it was really well received, and the candidness is part of why that long form discussion, I think, works so well.
Yeah, and I think honestly, and this is very self-serving, but I'm going to say it anyway. I thought it was a really fun way to start a conference. Again, I think everyone is there to hear from Ken and the folks at Tech Access Canada, because that's the whole reason why we come together, once a year or a couple times a year. But to be able to get him in that environment to do a fireside chat, but then also to talk about some of the real issues that are facing, the college applied research ecosystem, I think it was just a fun way to kick things off. I felt jazzed up, but obviously you and I were, up on the stage with Ken, but
I felt jazzed too.
Jazzed. Right. It was good. It was good.
Yeah.
Good way to kick things off. So again, if you're listening to this and you have a conference coming up, you know who to talk to. We'll come. We won't bring cameras, but we'll show up. So
exactly.
Anyway, without further ado,
delay,
let's just go right into Ken Doyle, Executive Director of Tech Access Canada.
Kenny D. Mike, we're here. They tried to silence us with audio issues, but we can't be contained.
Probably should explain why we're here first.
Yeah.
Introduce Ken.
So I'm sure everyone here downloads it every month, but Mike and I are the hosts of a podcast called the Unlikely Innovators. Maybe we'll spend a bit of time just why we did that and how it's going.
Yeah, it was a COVID project. Obviously, like many of you, we found stuck at home. So Steve and I thought there's no college applied research podcast that we were aware of anyway. So we started doing one in not the first summer of COVID, but 2021. Or no, was it? Anyway, it doesn't matter. So our first 5 episodes were kind of just focused on what is applied research. We actually had an episode just about TACs, about navigating the funding landscape, and then we quickly realized that we probably didn't have enough to sustain, a weekly podcast for an entire season. So we started inviting guests to come on, and so here we are now, 4 years later. I think this will be, episode 110. We've had a lot of guests on throughout the years. I think pretty much like all of them have been guest featured centered episodes in fields from post-secondary to private sector companies, and so. That's why we're here today. That's why you're having to listen to us right now.
Yeah, and I think the theme of the podcast, we one of us coined the name the Unlikely Innovators, but
It was you.
Yeah, it was me. I didn't want to. It was so cool when I came up with that. It was like the only creative thing I've ever done.
The best thing you've ever done, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that. Yeah, it's a bit harsh, actually.
I'm trying to lighten it.
So the thing that we can see, like we have a bit of a thesis for the show, and that is we try and find people that are either themselves the embodiment of an unlikely innovator, meaning that they had a winding path, as most of us do, to where they are, or that they're working on something that you couldn't anticipate. And we found that in ourselves, we had no business working in innovation, but we are still don't, and aren't innovative, and college applied research has not been viewed as a source of innovation to the wider public. So I think that's what was our North Star. And then we sort of applied that to every guest we saw. We have an impressive guest list so far, but you should see how impressive the list of people that said no is. It's much more impressive than the ones that said yes.
Much longer.
Yeah, much longer. We've been blocked a few times, cease and desist letters, all that good stuff.
We have a really good legal team, though. So
yeah, that's right. But we could go on like this and banter forever, and we often do, and our podcast episodes get too long, but we're not going to do that for you today. I think what we'll do, and we've only started this recently, but it was kind of a funny thing. We start reading people's bios in front of them, and it's really awkward when you're telling them about their accomplishments while you're staring at them. So what we're going to do is let Ken Doyle introduce himself, and then we'll ask him some pointed questions.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you. My mic on?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Right, so I'm Ken Doyle. Great to see a lot of familiar faces and some new faces. Thanks everybody for coming to the event. Gentlemen, thank you for having me on. So I'm originally from New Brunswick, now in Ottawa. I've been there about 30 years. Before, I guess spent the last 20 years in the college applied research advocacy association space at the federal level, which has been a fantastic journey, very interesting. Before that, I was in the aviation industry, and I've been fortunate to work for both of the national associations that advocate for college public policy issues, and I've really found a niche in applied research innovation, and was honored to be tapped as the inaugural executive director for what was then the Réseau TAC network, now TAC Access Canada, which was just an amazing initiative, and started off as just a modest pilot for a couple of years, and then 25 centers, and fast forward almost a decade, and we're up to 67 centers, and just a great momentum, great energy, and I'm just again honored and thrilled to be part of the ride.
Well, we're gonna talk about that, but because you are the star of this fireside chat, this episode, we did want to ask you a little bit about yourself before we get to all the great work that TAC Access is doing and what the network is doing. So you mentioned, growing up in New Brunswick. What did you see as your ideal career path? Did you ever envision yourself in this space, or did you have a different plan and you've kind of pivoted and found your way to where you are now?
Well, I mean, as a younger man, I thought I'd make it into professional wrestling. I was a big fan of the Ultimate Warrior at the time. But, not being 6'4" and 250 pounds, I'm getting close now, but as a teenager, not on the height, realized that probably wasn't a viable opportunity, and my parents were, pretty insistent that I pursue higher education, so that was fun. And then in doing that, we ended up moving from New Brunswick to Ottawa, and I got a job at the airport after some retail experience, which was fun. I learned a lot about human beings. Spent a couple of years working at Value Village, which was interesting, front of house, so learned really what the unwashed masses are like. And then went to the airport and fueling planes, and I mean, I'd still be there today. That was an incredibly fun job. Those folks in the big orange trucks you see outside putting the fuel on the plane. That was awesome. It was a perfect job for me because it scratched an itch. It was great. And then I was doing that while going to school, and then walk across the stage, get that diploma, and then it's I guess time to pivot, do something new. And I was very fortunate to get into this space, this world. But growing up, if I wasn't going to become a wrestler or a professional hockey player, where again, too slow, uncoordinated, and bad at hockey to make the show, this has been a great fallback.
I used to cut grass at the Sudbury airport, and you wouldn't know it was an airport unless there's 2 times during the day, because there's only 2 flights at the time. So I just basically I was more of a farmer. I cut grass in a large field, I guess you could say. Ken, one of the things, and I'm going to sort of title this section "The DNA of a Lobbyist," because it has some profundity behind it. You've had the fortune so far of working with levels of government, advocating for the work that colleges do in the innovation space. What is it that you think are some character traits that make up what we'd call a lobbyist?
Well, that's a great question. Where before getting into this space, I'd never set foot on a college campus. Was aware of them, but unaware of the great work they were doing. So I was a blank slate, and then came in and read everything on paper in black and white. Okay, I get what a college is, what it's doing, and this whole applied research innovation thing, interesting. Again, I had no idea what R&D was, whether business, higher education, government R&D. So learning that, and it wasn't until I got to see it firsthand and appreciate it that I really developed an affinity for it and understood. So I was a blank slate, not a convert, having previous experience. And then really meeting the people, seeing the incredible work they do on the ground, understanding the opportunities if we really unleash this, but also the challenges they're facing, being sort of the underdog. So I guess it was more of not being a convert to the value of applied R&D, more of a missionary trying to extol what an incredible thing it is and the impact it can have on every Canadian. And then the advocacy piece twinned with that was basically trying to convey the message to get that end result, while respecting how the advocacy profession works, public affairs profession, where I guess the 3 most important things that I've learned are time is the most valuable resource a public office holder has. Whether it's political staff, a minister, people in departments, time is a finite resource. So if you respect their time and come at them with tight material, you've been briefed ahead of time, any guest you bring with you ahead of time, they respect that because you're respecting their time in the game. As long as you leave them with 3 bullet points to take away from the meeting, that's solid. And then understanding how the system works. It's something as simple as 1867. What's in Section 91? What's in Section 92? What are the federal and provincial responsibilities for public policy issues? And if you're advocating at the federal level, hyper-focusing on things that are in the federal government's purview, responsibility, not talking about, education, because the provinces take care of that. The feds can deal with training. So there's nuance in words like that. But again, is respectful that you show how the system works, and then if you're trying to work the system in your favor, that goes a long way. And I think probably the most important currency that anybody in the public affairs space can have is trust. You know it well. You work with clients, hundreds of clients every year. Their innovative idea is their baby, and that trust is earned. And once you've got it, you don't want to jeopardize it. The same thing in the advocacy space, where you're building relationships, you're trying to help people, you're trying to advance your agenda and make a positive benefit for Canada. But you need the trust of these people who will go out on a limb for you. And once it's burnt, well, you've lost all your currency, all your capital.
And I think your experience of like not being familiar with the space is probably familiar to a lot of people in the room. I know that when I joined Cambrian in 2016, like I had not even heard of college applied research, right? But I think once you get to understand it, you see, and you get to travel and see some of the other great TACs that are doing, fantastic work, like you stay and you want to stay in that space, right? So I think you've definitely got that. You've been converted now, as I think we all have. So, but one of the things, since you've been converted, and you've been the executive director of Tech Access now since 2016, and so you've obviously had a great vantage point over the last 8 years. Maybe if you could just talk a little bit about how the network has evolved, since you took the helm.
Again, it's been fascinating. So I'd worked in college applied research before Tech Access Canada, but my knowledge of it was basically from the West Coast to the Ottawa River. There was no engagement east of Ottawa, and being able to go and understand what the incredible work going on in Quebec is, and how they basically had a head start 20 years ahead of the rest of the country, and how we modeled the rest of the country's activities after them, was incredibly valuable. And I mean, I think the Tech Access Canada Network, the TACs, it sort of comes down to three main things I've seen evolve over time. One's the refinement of the TAC model itself, the Technology Access Center, where everybody is working to be an inch wide but a mile deep with their areas of innovation expertise. And they're constantly fine-tuning them, refining them. When they have to invest in technical talent, it's bolster existing areas rather than trying to be everything to everyone. And the neat part is these centers, based on the model, it's 5-year renewable mandates. They have to evolve over time. So and again, our friends in Quebec have had centers there for 40 years now, 5 years at a time. And the center that was awarded in the mid '80s doesn't look anything like the center that's operating today, because it's evolve or die. And you're servicing the needs of industry. Industry evolves. You have to be right there with them for today's challenges, but also have a sense of what's coming down the line 3 to 5 years from now, to be able to build the expertise in-house and then help them out when industry comes knocking on the door for those problems. And then I think the other aspect would be maturity. The Technology Access Centers in a subset of the wider college applied research space, a subset of the wider innovation ecosystem, there's a level of maturity where, there's a finite amount of resources and a finite amount of capacity in the center. They've doubled down on their refined areas of expertise. So they've developed a level of maturity where they can say no to a client who comes in the door, who may be a local client, but you don't have the expertise to service them. So rather than just take the job and half-ass it, you refer them to another center that has the expertise that can get them the solution they need in the time they need it. Not worried about losing deal flow. You want the best outcome for that client, and that pays dividends in the end. The wider sector may not always operate like that. And then I think, linked to that, I think it's sort of a trickle-down effect, is the collaboration that's been built within this network. It's an incredibly strong network. It's effectively become a big family, where sometimes companies come to you with a problem that's bigger than your center can do, bigger than any one center, and need to tag in some tag team partners, go back to a wrestling reference, to help them. Maybe it's the combination of, cow production and artificial intelligence and advanced manufacturing to get them the solution they need. And luckily, within the network and all the resources, we're able to put together those all-star teams for a short engagement to help that company. And that sense of collaboration where everybody's peers and equals, again, sets this group apart.
Yeah, very true. We actually had the lightning bolt yesterday when we've been trying to work with a mining apparel company, a workwear company, and then we saw Vestech Pro, and I said, oh my gosh, we've been sort of spinning our tires trying to help this company because we don't do anything in textiles. Maybe we can build a bridge there, so we're looking forward to doing that. That's weird. I didn't know the TACs were renewable. That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, again.
Is that for everyone, or?
Yeah.
Too soon.
Again.
A little inside. So obviously you've had the privilege. Sorry if anyone wants to keep laughing at that. That's you've had the privilege of seeing obviously all TACs across Canada. We could probably say. One thing I wanted you to talk a little bit about, because we see this very viscerally in our communities, and I want you to talk about the community impact business community, research and innovation ecosystems, and how TACs, in large cities and in small cities, play that role.
No, absolutely. And I've been fortunate to come up and visit y'all in Sudbury a number of times, and it's always incredible. I think it's important to look at the industrial makeup of Canada, right? I think we're the second biggest geographic country on the planet. Half the population lives within 50 kilometers of the border. 95% of the population lives within 50 kilometers of a community college campus. But there's 1 million companies in Canada, and 99.7% of those are small companies. I think 75% of companies have fewer than 8 employees, and the average is 4. So giant dispersed country, tons of small companies, not a lot of medium or large companies, not a lot of multinational anchors in Canada. So for industry, and we've lamented Canada's lack of productivity, innovation, commercialization for 3-4 decades now. It's nothing new. There's that valley of death of commercialization, where they have a really cool idea and they get it to the bench scale, but then to get 100,000 units in store shelves, there's this valley of death of commercialization. And I really see the TAC as a way to bridge that valley of death, where the TAC comes in after bench scale, takes whatever rough prototype they've got, takes it to the lab scale. Okay, can we do this in 200-300 liters? Okay, let's do the pilot scale, do a few thousand liters, see how it is, test it, make it, break it, refine it, optimize it, and then when you've got the the plug-and-play formula, connect that company to somebody who will do the 100,000 batch run, knowing that it's the right thing at the right time. So that mid-scale space where you're not inventing anything, you're not selling anything at the other end, just helping people on that commercialization journey, where again, trust is such a huge part of it. It makes sense in a country like Canada with tremendous college system resources across the country, tapping into that to solve the innovation challenges of innovators and entrepreneurs who don't have in-house R&D capacity. They'll never be able to or they shouldn't buy a $100,000 robot welder or 3D printer and then not know what the hell to do with it. Being able to access your equipment, your facilities, and more importantly, the smart people who know how to use them to solve a challenge makes a ton of sense. So from an industrial perspective, the model works. And then in the community, I mean, it's really great to see the TACs act as a region's innovation hub, where there's a whole bunch of players in just the wider ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem in a community. The TAC is that hub, and then can make warm referrals to other actors in the system who do specific things. Maybe it's funding, maybe it's IP advice, legal advice, this kind of things, where there's a defined role and you stay in your lane, but you can connect to all the other players who then get to stay in their lanes for the benefit of the company, for the benefit of the community. And what I've seen around the country, I mean, one of the neatest things I've ever seen was up in Sudbury, McLean Engineering and their test mine, where the mining industry, the extractive industry is critically important to Canada. I mean, the country's been built on natural resources, where they're running so efficient now in the mines 24/7, whatever it is. They really are not risk averse or innovation averse, but time is money. And if they want to adopt electric vehicles or new wireless technologies, remote operation, that kind of thing, they can't afford the downtime of the operation to implement these innovations or adopt the technology. So McLean Engineering, with their test mine, which is a fully functional mine, almost a playground for people to test out new innovative mining products, and then once it's road ready, or I guess mine ready, seamlessly plug it into the operations of a proper mine and generate that ROI, that revenue. It's a beautiful thing. It's a public good. It's a resource that'll help that sector adopt these new technologies they wouldn't otherwise be able to do, just given the nature of their economics. And I look in a lot of cases as the TAC as a lot of communities want a big anchor firm to come in. They want Apple or Boeing or whoever to come in, and then there'll be great jobs, supply chain, trickle down benefits. I see in a lot of communities in Canada, the TAC is almost that anchor firm, where there's innovation, talent development going on, there's resources for the companies to grow and scale, and it becomes the thing that draws in more companies because they have that trusted innovation intermediary, that R&D service provider to help their journey scale. So almost the TAC as an anchor company, I think, is something that we haven't quite looked at it the way that maybe our friends in the economic development world may want to take another crack at.
I didn't know you were going to mention the test mine, but it's actually cool because it's also in town. So we're able to actually send clients to this mine to test underground, and it's not, when people think of a mine, they think of, a lot of trees around in the middle of nowhere. This is a 5-minute walk from my house. So yeah, it's really neat.
Well, I think the other point that I just want to pick up on is the anchor, because I think, at least with our experience in Sudbury, we have been part of a lot of those economic development tours where they're bringing in new companies that are looking to either set up shop in Sudbury or actually expand their operations, and Cambrian becomes a stop on one of those tours because they're showcasing the R&D capacity that we have at the college, right? In addition to our French college, Collège Boréal and Laurentian, obviously it's part of that larger ecosystem, but certainly I think Steve would agree that we've become, I think, part of that. And I think that's probably very similar to other communities where you've been embedded into a lot of these delegations that come through because you're showcasing, what the community can offer to prospective companies.
Yeah, you're part of the pitch.
Yeah.
For investment attraction. I would have never thought that, 5-10 years ago that we'd be making a case to be part of the pitch for why a company would want to set up there. But now we are, and I'm sure there's lots of people in the audience that feel that way too about their tax, right?
So last night, Steve and I went to the Habs game. I'm sorry if anyone is a Montreal Canadiens fan. It was obviously not a game for you to have taken in. It was entertaining, but they obviously played horrifically. But one of the things that I wanted to do now is drawing inspiration from, maybe not entirely from what Montreal did, but I'm going to really try to stick handle this question for Ken because I don't want to set him up for a play in which he has his head down and he gets nailed. So I just wanted to talk quickly about the TAC program. Obviously, we wouldn't be here without it, but I think we can all be candid that it's not without its issues. And so if you had a magic wand, what would be one spell you would cast to maybe improve or enhance this great program that brings us all together?
That's a lovely loaded question that I'm going to try to artfully dodge. Look, I think we could all agree that one of the acceptable outcomes of applied research and innovation is failure, and that for the companies, there's almost something wrong in Canadian culture where we demonize failure. We lionize these companies till they get big, and then they fall apart. We never talk about them again. And then, we evangelize the concept that failure is an acceptable outcome of doing a project that's risky, innovative, that kind of thing. And that's, I think, in the Canadian DNA. We have to shift compared to other countries where failure is cool and they learn from it, pivot and reboot. That's great. I'd be a hypocrite if I was sitting up here and complaining about the program and some of the challenges with it, because, bless their hearts. Some years ago, NSERC, fairly unprompted, decided to evolve the College and Community Innovation Program because it had been around for 10 years. I said, okay, well, let's evolve this thing. Let's delete some stuff. Let's add some stuff. So they're trying to innovate within an innovation program, which is, again, I'm not a mathlete, but that sounds quite complicated, quite risky. So, many people have said objectively and subjectively that evolution was a failure, and it broke a lot of good things. And that's okay, because like I said, failure is an acceptable outcome of applied research. So you're going to innovate, you're going to break some stuff, it's okay, because as long as you learn a lesson and come back stronger and pivot, then everybody's better off. So, just like the TACs help their companies pivot and get stronger, I think our community can help NSERC pivot and get stronger for a program that, again, is tremendous. And the fact that they even cared enough to even try to improve it speaks volumes to the growth we've seen over the last 20 years. Now, if I had that magic wand, and I'm not much of a reader, but I listen to the audiobooks from time to time, so I've listened to the Harry Potters, so I get the reference. I like to listen to them when they do the accents. That's
Harry
funny.
Potter doesn't have a monopoly on magic wands, I don't think.
Really?
Could continue, please.
Oh, okay.
An interjection not worthwhile. Go ahead.
I'm not big into the magic world. Great community, tremendous people, but I have to bone up on my magic wandery. Anyways, if I had to suggest some changes with that magic wand, it'd be, just a consultation with the community first and foremost. And again, it's just like what y'all do. It's demand driven. You're solving company problems, not inventing something and pushing it out to them and hope they have the receptor capacity to make it successful. So, a good consultation with the community, and make the expectations of the programs crystal clear. This program does X, we expect Y at the end of the mandate. If you did Y, then you succeed. But the opaqueness or the trying to, move the yardsticks while the game's playing. That's not fun. And then, I guess being transparent with decisions. We talked about trust earlier. I'm going to come back to trust. We're a small community. You look at the university world, there's probably 20, 30,000 academics who may be applying for a program. The college applied research community, there's only one federal program that enables it, really. And the community is, a couple hundred people. So there's relationships built there between the programs and the people executing it on the ground because of the nature of the grants, where they're all institutional based. So that trust is so important to earn. It's two ways. And then when it gets, broken, it's a hell of a thing to try to rebuild. And I think, transparency about decisions and what went into them and quantitative and qualitative reasons goes a long way to rebuild those bridges. And keep it simple. This doesn't have to be rocket surgery. We're good at what we do. You keep it simple, clearly defined mandates, clear scope, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if I had the magic wand, that's sort of what I'd be inclined to do. Just the way I see it, the wider innovation ecosystem, you've got the universities, government labs, college applied research, then the TACs, and the TACs are like thoroughbreds. And what do thoroughbreds like to do? Like to run. So just let them run. When you put them in a petting zoo and treat them as such, then your outcomes are going to be suboptimal, and that's a shame. So I guess the magic wand would be just let the thoroughbreds run.
That was a magic wand metaphor, but also there were 3 wishes in there, right? So I like your ordered mind, like state, illustrate, elaborate, 3 points. It's good. I don't know if any of, to borrow a term, any of y'all are news junkies out there. If you've been, hearing what's on the wind, but someone told me that we might be facing a change in government at some point. What do you think change in government, likely away from the Liberals towards Conservatives, would mean for applied research and the TACs?
Again, an excellent, timely question. And almost the setup and the phrasing to it is part of the underlying issue that I think I have and we have, is almost just a hint of a sense of entitlement that, if the change in government and they come in, everything will be fine. And, it may be, but it's just that opportunity where it's, basically once in a decade that we get to tell our story, right? What is our unique value proposition? Why do we deserve a new government to care about us when there are so many other public policy issues out there with way bigger voices who've been at the table a lot longer than us with a lot more political capital? Why would anybody care about us or our issues? And that's why it's incumbent on us as a community to step our game up and tell our story, and really do it with consistent messaging. It's interesting that you take the niche public policy issue of applied research for colleges at the federal level, and there's 3, 4, 5, 6 different voices advocating for it, all saying different things at different times to different people. And one of the most valuable pieces of advice I've ever received from a political staffer was, Kenny, when you get all these voices come in, they all want different things. If we pick you and not them, you're happy, but multiple voices complain. So for us, because your sector can't get its act together, it's easier for us just to say no to everybody, disappoint them equally, and give the money to somebody else. So I think now is a really good time for a gut check for our sector. Can we collaboratively work together and try to advance key messages and realize that, one size fits all or the whole kumbaya thing may not be the play anymore, and that we do need differentiated supports, more supports at the federal level, but putting it from a government perspective, what's in it for them? What are we bringing to the table? And being able to, articulate our impact qualitatively and quantitatively, have up-to-date metrics, profiles of the companies, testimonials from the companies, all these kind of things. That'll be the make or break. And like I said, it's once in a decade we get a shot at this, and it's coming up soon. So now's the time to basically rally everybody and step our game up.
The next question we wanted to ask you, and Steve alluded to this a little bit earlier, but our TAC was not renewed in last year's competition. And so this, we've talked to you about this before, and many people in the room know this, so it's not a secret. But one of the things we wanted to ask you, what, you didn't know this? I'm so sorry for you to have to find out so publicly. But the question we wanted to ask was obviously TACs that are facing the prospect of not being renewed. Obviously, we were one last year. Anyone in this room is on looking at that at some point. What would be some tips or strategies you would suggest for ways to keep the party going, so to speak? And what I mean by that is, obviously, you know that you can reapply, and that's something that everybody should do. But are there other things that you've seen that other TACs have done over the years where if maybe the traditional funding source has evaporated, but there's other ways to try to, I think, keep the value that the TAC has been providing to the community through other means?
Again, an excellent question, very topical, very relevant to a lot of people in the room. If I can get philosophical for a moment.
You can.
What is a TAC, right? I mean, is it a grant? Is it a program? Is it a model for a college research center to operate as? So, you know, if you take away the grant, can that college research center still operate as a TAC in the TAC model? I say absolutely. I think it's more of a model than just a funding program, that kind of thing. If you operate like a TAC, that's important to the region because of all the public good benefits it creates. Now, without that grant, though, that core funding, you run into some trouble where all of a sudden it gets harder to pay the bills and keep people employed. And you spent multiple years building up incredibly valuable multidisciplinary teams of talented innovators. Nobody produces applied researchers, post-secondary program to create your people. And you've built them up, and now if you have to let them go, release them into the wild, they'll land fine, they'll be at industry, but you're never getting them back. And once you lose people, you lose capacity. You lose those billable hours for those people every year. And once you lose your capacity, you can service fewer companies. And we know you're so important to the community that a lot of clients need your help. And now that wait list that they're on is going to get longer and longer and longer for every person that departs the center. So now you're caught in a pretty hard deal where you want to keep things going, like you said, to keep the party going. But then some of the nefarious incentives start to show themselves, like maybe unfairly competing with private sector actors and offering, routine services and testing just to generate revenue. And then, once you're down that path of effectively degeneracy, you're so far afield from what a TAC is that you're no longer a TAC. And it's almost like that slow, painful spiral some celebrities get onto when life gets too good. So as long as you keep operating like a TAC, you're good. And like you said, diversification of funding sources is key. I think at our peril, we rely way too extensively on one program at one guaranteeing council at the federal level to support things, when there are over 1,000 R&D support programs at the federal and provincial levels just in Canada. And then forget, industry associations, private sector investment, not-for-profits, philanthropy, all these kind of things. There are other programs out there. So a diversification of funding sources would help because I guess much like the NHL playoffs, and it may not be super relevant for some teams, but it's like the playoffs. You got to win to get in and win to stay in. And the TAC grant's exactly like that. So as long as you can keep the party going by diversifying your funding sources, there'll be a chance to win your way back in with the lessons learned. But again, it goes back to the magic wand question about the transparency. Why weren't you renewed? And is that justifiable, defendable? What is a TAC? So it's a tough one, but just diversifying the funding sources. I think a good analogy would be our friends down to the south in the States, where the large defense contractors, Lockheed, General Dynamics, Boeing, when they're building a new fighter jet or warship, they make sure that a critical component is built in each one of the 50 states. So that if Washington ever tried to cancel that fighter jet program, you'd have 50 governors calling up and complaining. I think we have a risk where the entirety of college applied research is in one program at one grant council. It wouldn't be too hard to delete the entire room with one stroke of a pen, or I guess, nowadays, a cursor, highlight and delete.
I like the philosophizing, because I remember when we went through the application to get our TAC, and this was when they had site visits, which would be one of my magic wand things, is that because I think that's actually pull the curtain back and see what's actually happening. Anyway, at the end of the presentation, I was not sure where it was going to go. If you were to ask me, I would have said I don't think we did it. But my final closing remarks were, regardless of the outcome of this decision, Cambrian will still continue to have a center for smart mining, right? Regardless of whether or not we were TAC designated or not, I think we were always wedded to the work that we were doing. And I think the same thing applies now, regardless of where our current status is and where our status may be in a few months. We will always have the Center for Smart Mining at Cambrian in some form, right?
Well, that's big of you. How did you feel when we got the news that we didn't get it?
Well, we can share that at the soiree today if anyone wants to ask exactly how I felt.
Yeah, we had two distinct reactions, him and I,
Yeah.
when we got the note. Yeah, but do ask us after. It's a funny story. And you can see where we've gotten over it now, so we otherwise we wouldn't be here, frankly. But thank you. A little bit of a forward-looking statement, which is a mining term. Whenever you're doing a presentation to your shareholders, there's a disclaimer that says, these are forward-looking statements. If our, resources in Namibia become overrun by rebels or something like that, these are no longer valid. But as it stands now, if you were to take a crystal ball or maybe a time machine, we're using so many metaphors here. Basically, what does the future of tax look like in Canada is what I want to say. But the more eloquent way would be, if we're regathering here in 5 to 8 years, what do you think will have happened to the program and to the network?
Well, I mean, I think Quebec proved the model 40 years ago. We adopted it, took it cross country. It's great. It's been validated as an effective innovation intermediary model. It works. The OECD's done 2 studies on it, so that's international validation of the great work that we've done. I'd like to see a scaled up version of a proven model, because right now, I mean, we're punching well above our weight. Everybody has wait lists that are a mile long, so the demand is there. Canadian companies and innovators want help. We're just capacity constrained at the moment. So I'd like to see an increase in the number of centers, and then an increase in the capacity of the centers, where you look at all the capacity building awards that have gone out to the college sector over the last decade. The TAC is a logical extension of the centers that have created an almost ability to be. They're still in demand, so they need to keep on keeping on because their community needs them to. So scaling up the number of centers and the size of the centers, retaining the model and keeping the focus very narrow would probably go a long way to helping us. Like, keep that mandate, that focus narrow, no scope creep. So just let other actors in that innovation ecosystem do it. Let other people incubate, accelerate, fund, do IP. We just focus on that TRL 4 to 8 space of being that, from lab bench or from bench scale to lab scale to pilot scale, and then production, that mushy middle, right? And just let us do it really damn well. The problem I see is that this was, many people have said, one of the best kept secrets in the Canadian innovation ecosystem. The issue we're running into is that the rest of the world sort of woke up and took notice. So I think I've had more conversations with officials from governments outside of Canada in the last 12 months than within Canada. And that's unfortunate. Even down, to the south in the Inflation Reduction Act, Joe Biden put $3.1 billion American, which again, not a mathlete, that's probably like 20 billion Canadian, into creating 1,300 effectively technology access centers, where they've got the same problems. Small companies that need help, a robust community college sector. Why not combine the two? And they're going to do it. They're going to be bigger, faster, stronger than us. Now, we've got a head start, but like all things Canadian, we come up with a brilliant idea and then export it and have the finished product sold back to us. So I think if we could get ahead of that, and even our friends in Serbia and Brazil came to visit us recently at our offices and wanted to learn, because they're basically where Canada was 30 years ago. The university model of push and tech transfer is working-ish, but what else could they do? And they wanted to skip basically 3 decades in 6 months. And because we're very kind, collaborative people, we explain the Canadian model, how it works, and just like, it's that easy? Yeah, it's that easy. So I mean, I almost need a rallying cry here to invest in something that works, rather than follow the typical Canadian path.
Or a royalty.
Yeah. I mean, we could license it abroad. Yeah. And I mean, like I'd also, I think if you were looking, forward looking, I think I'd like to see more provinces get into the game and jump on the bandwagon. I mean, Quebec, like I said, has been a leader for 4 decades, and they deserve all the respect for the direct funding they put into their centers, the model they've built. Saskatchewan, very strong. Newfoundland and Labrador, tremendous support there. The rest of the country, it's a bit of a patchwork. It's a little bit inconsistent. And I think that's sort of the low-hanging fruit to get the provinces on board and really amplify the impacts, and everybody gets to share that W at the end of the day.
We read in Roseanne O'Reilly Runta's book that you were featured in. There was a chapter about Ken, and one of the things that that she wrote about with you is that you, I guess, had told her that you always carry a notebook with you wherever you go because you never know when innovation would strike. So if we were to, tackle you at some point and steal your notebook and go through it, what would we find in there that has led to, tangible ideas for tech access and some of the programs and initiatives that you guys are currently offering right now?
Oh no, that's great. I mean, you don't have to tackle me. It's all love. It's right here.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's fun. You go to conferences, you cherry pick things from other sectors, other industries, then see how it applies in our space. Like the interactive visits program we have is fantastic, but the idea of super visits, where instead of just 20 hours and one TAC and one company collaborating, putting 100 hours on the table and bringing up to 5 centers together to truly attack it from a multi-jurisdictional, multi-sectoral, disciplinary team to give the optimal outcome for the company. That was great. Our Boomerang Innovation internship program, which we're very proud of, and our dear friends at ACOA wanted to pilot that because it was just trying to take an internship program and add something to it. So traditionally,
Oh, no. I was going to interrupt you, but it seems I have already. So if we were to look back in your notebook, it actually says Boomerang Innovation, and it made it through focus group testing to actually be the name of the program?
Oh, yeah. And there's crude drawings and everything. Now, luckily, I'm not gifted artistically, but I've got the best graphic designer on the planet in our collaborative
Absolutely.
suite. Yeah. So I was able to put together a crude layout, and she was able to make it majestic, and it looks great. Just the whole concept of a boomerang. It's got a leading edge and a trailing edge. And if you throw it properly, it'll come back to where it started. Otherwise, you throw it and it just goes. It's a stick. So this program was designed to be, you send somebody from the Atlantic provinces, a graduate of the universities or the colleges, out to attack somewhere else in the country and let them join your applied research team for 6, 9, 12 months and become an applied researcher, get that innovation literacy, innovation skills. And at the end of it, they head back to the Atlantic and work for a company for another internship where they're becoming knowledge transfer on 2 feet. And they're helping that company become more innovative. They're taking technologies from another part of the country that may not have made it to the Atlantic. And again, I'm from New Brunswick, so there's a little bit of a lag. And being able to, propel that company or, and they do that placement. At the end of it, maybe they want to stay on with the company, go work at another TAC, or maybe they see a market failure and want to start up their own company doing a third-party service to, again, help multiple companies in the Atlantic with their innovation challenges. So it was just trying to, take the traditional internship program and do it a little bit differently.
I was hoping you were to bring Boomerang Innovation up because I'm going to offer this now. I'm not going to do it right now, but Steve and I have made a wrap for Boomerang Innovation, and if we're in the right mood tonight at the soiree, we will do it for you, and maybe for Ken, and you can include that of the program. But I'm not gonna do it right now. We're not gonna do it right now.
Well, we don't have a beat, right? So
Yeah,
why don't you ask him about his shoes?
that's your question.
Okay. Well, I rudely interrupted, so I felt sheepish, but we were at Jack's Diner in Sudbury, which is like
excellent diner.
Greasy spoon.
Yep.
Great breakfast. Knocks a couple of years off your life whenever you go there. But you told us a harrowing tale, like that you went out to even more rural than Sudbury, rural Northern Ontario, to get some shoes that you had ordered from a guy, or you had met a guy who had some shoes. Can you tell us about that? And does that mean, like, is it just shoes that you go to strange places to procure, or are there other things that you get?
Well, okay, so I grew up in a time where, after school you jump on your bike, you go, you play road hockey, you disappear, you come home when it gets dark. I don't know if that was good parenting or bad parenting, but I've sort of embraced that. So yeah, It was on Kijiji, and this chap was selling a vintage pair of New Balance dad shoes, and they were just magnificent. And you're right, it was quite a 45-minute drive away from Sudbury into the hinterland, but they were just so majestic that I had to purchase them. And so anyways, I did, and wore them to our dinners. And it wasn't so much, I'm not a sneakerhead. I do have.
Wondering if you were had a sneaker collection. I think that's where we were going.
Oh, I do have quite a sneaker collection, but I realized as.
Then you're a sneakerhead.
No.
Okay.
I was.
Oh.
Reformed.
Yeah. I think of myself as being in the autumn of my youth. So I've realized that function is more important than form. Sure. So I've pivoted to Hokas and Ultras and just ugly ass comfortable shoes. The sneakers I have are great, and it's turned out they've become quite an appreciated asset. So I'll probably get rid of those, but they're quite stylish and I am not. But these New Balances weren't about a sneaker collection like that. They were dad shoes, and they were so mint, so white that all I wanted to do was get back to Ottawa, get out there and mow the lawn. Get those grass stains on them, and then jump on the grill, barbecue up some stuff, and make my neighbors jealous.
Yeah.
Because that would be the alpha dad shoe on the block, and that's something you can only get 45 minutes away from Sudbury, which is several hours away from
anything.
Urban Canada. Put it that way.
An unlikely source for the
exactly.
ultimate dad shoe.
I love it when we say the name of the podcast in the podcast.
But as far as collections and stuff, I grew up collecting hockey cards, baseball cards, and I guess today my guilty pleasure, I like to collect the Hot Wheels, little toy cars there. Yeah. I derive a lot of pleasure from that.
Well, Ken, you also collect TACs, and that is what we're most appreciative of.
Aw, beautiful.
We were hoping to open it up to the audience for some questions, because I think we are still on time. There's 5 minutes left. So the last question, I will defer my question to the audience, but I did want to ask you this because we'd be bad podcasters if we didn't go back and say, you talked about wanting to be a professional wrestler growing up. What was your wrestling name? Because I'm sure if you were thinking about it that seriously, you would have had a moniker. So what was it, if you could share it?
Well, so again, like in New Brunswick, in that time, it's New Brunswick. So wrestling and monster trucks were big. And I,
good.
No,
Really happy with this.
It's that I learned, almost about other characters, be it the Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, that kind of thing, that Bigfoot, the monster truck, wasn't the original Bigfoot. There'd been several iterations of it under the same name.
Big feet.
If you will. And that's cool. It's a good brand. Branding. Learn branding young. So for wrestling, in my naivete, I wanted to be the Ultimate Warrior, like version 2.0 or 3.0, because I figured by that time the existing Ultimate Warrior would probably have passed away, and I was not wrong. But then maybe if I, took my vitamins, said my prayers, did my homework, I could get big like the Ultimate Warrior, and then maybe be the third incarnation of him, which again, as we've seen, due to my limited New Brunswick genetics, that was not on the table. So I had to pivot to, I guess, whatever it is I do these days.
A side trip worth taking.
Ken Doyle, the Ultimate Warrior.
Absolutely.
There we go.
Thank you, Ken, for joining us.
Oh, thank you for the
thank
opportunity.
you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.